We have a little bit more of a somber discussion today, a very important one I kind of want to learn and understand a little bit more, and it's kind of hard unless you've been through the experiences Dave has. Dave McRae, our speaker today, he's a relationship and sexuality facilitator and guides people through their desires to explore alternative lifestyle choices. Shortly after midnight on June 17th, 2016, so just over a year ago, his son, Jeffrey John McRae, was killed by a drunk driver. Since his son's death, he's become much more aware and empathetic as a speaker, advocate, and mentor. Today he's going to share some of the things he's learned and felt. And I actually have to mention today that this week, unfortunately, his father also passed away. So that's so much more on his mind, and we should give him condolences because it's a hard week, and still agreed to come speak to us. So give it up for Dave McRae.
Okay, can you hear me through the speaker here? Okay, so first of all, I just want to say thank you to Oasis and thank for everybody that shows up. I just wanted to premise this by saying that last week I was here for Dr. Holland's speech about UVU, and his introduction is probably longer than my speech. And then the fact that Doug isn't here this weekend, we can all have a little moment of mourning for that as well. But I'm honored to do this. I really have spent a lot of time over the last year or so thinking about grieving. And it is a little somber today. Jeff asked me to speak before Christmas, and then when this opening came up, I said, oh, okay, this is going to be a much better discussion to have the week before Halloween than the week before Christmas. So with that, I want to start off by asking you all to participate in a very short guided meditation. Grief, as I have learned in the last year, there are thousands and thousands of books and resources and counselors and therapists who are available for people who are in grief to deal with their grief. There's 5 steps of grief. There's, denial, anger, acceptance, moving on, all these different things that have been come up for people who are in grief. What is lacking in that process, from my perspective, is how the kind and loving people in our lives react to us while we're in grief. Everybody wants to be helpful. Everybody wants to be supportive. But it's very difficult for people to do that because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience on how to approach somebody who can't function and what to say. So I start off my talk with a small guided meditation to help you understand. And it can be a little painful, and I understand that, and I hope that you'll follow through with it, because I think the end result is going to be beneficial. So for just a second, I would like you all to close your eyes. I would like you to think of one of your children. Now, I'm a father of 3, and I know this is a taboo subject, but we all have that one kid that we kind of connect with just a little bit more, that we laugh with just a little bit more, that when the conversations get difficult, it's just a little bit easier to talk to that one child. I want you to think about their last birthday party and how fun you were having, how much fun you were having in watching them open their gifts. Now I want you to think about lying in your bed, sleeping peacefully, and getting a phone call. On the other end of the phone is one of your other children. And you're like, are you okay? Dad? Jeff was killed tonight. And he's not coming back. I want you to imagine for just a second how you would feel if you knew that child that you had just celebrated their birthday was never coming home. And in a week, you were going to be in a mortuary or a chapel, and their casket was going to be in front of you. Okay, you can open your eyes now. I believe that we're all on a spiritual continuum, especially in this group. We have the atheists at one end, and we have the born-agains at the other end. And there's a spectrum of belief on the spiritual continuum. And what I want to do is to let you know that there is no judgment as to where you're at on that continuum. One of the things that I want to teach people while you're in this moment where you're thinking about this child that's not coming home is the people who are going to come up to you and share with you their support. And the things that they'll do and they'll say is what I want this group to walk away from and know not to do and say these things. Don't worry. Your child has ceased to exist. There is no afterlife. There is no soul, and they're gone. So don't mourn. It's just the way it is. Or your Heavenly Father has called your son home to serve a mission. Or your child is happier where they're at now. Or, and this is a new one on my list this week, my father has been going to the temple in Provo to work at the baptistry for 25 years on Tuesdays. For the last year, I've driven him up to the temple. And many of you have seen my post on Facebook as I'm parked in the general authorities parking spot, just hoping that somebody's going to come and tell me to leave. But this last two Tuesdays ago, my dad, who has dementia, got out of my car and shuffled to the temple to do his duty, and I always kind of watch him go up to the door. I got a call 15 minutes later when I walked into the house that he had fallen. And I'm like, okay, my mom's fallen 20 times. I'll just come up and pick him up and, he'll be back next Tuesday. No, the paramedics are here. He's going to the hospital. Get to the hospital. My dad had broken 5 ribs, 4 of them twice. And he'd split open his head. He had 6 staples in his head. He was in ICU for a week. When he died, 3 people in my mother's ward came to comfort her and said, what a beautiful way to start your journey to heaven, in the house of the Lord, in service. If my mom hadn't been standing there, I would have said, so you're telling me that a loving God pushed my dad down, broke 5 of his ribs, and split his head open on the marble floor in front of the recommend desk in order to start his journey to heaven, and then put him in the hospital for a week. It was probably the most miserable week of my dad's life. He suffered tremendously that week. So these are the things that people will say when they're trying to love you and be compassionate towards you. The process of grieving is a very individual, personal. I have a couple of things on my there. It's a personal, and it's a something that we can't define. Everyone here had a different experience when I was giving you through that little guided meditation. Everybody had a different experience. Everybody experiences grief differently. There's a difference between mourning and grieving. Yesterday I spoke at my dad's funeral. It was an amazing funeral. He's 85 years old, and he loved everybody that was there, and everybody that was there loved him. All the eulogies were about memories. We laughed. We told the stories about how Dad broke his little finger. We told told stories about, this, that, and the other thing. And it was the way funerals, quote unquote, should be. We celebrated a life. I call that a timely death. I call the losing of a child or a young spouse who is helping you raise children, or a sibling, an untimely death. And it's the untimely deaths that I wanted to focus on today, not the timely deaths. I'm painting a very broad picture of how grief works. It's so individual. So I want you to know that I'm not focusing on anybody, but I wanted to focus on a couple of things. We have a Bill of Rights for people who are in grieving that has been developed by thousands and thousands of people and concentrated down to this. And I want to read this. I have the right to grieve however long I want to, even when others think I should get over it. I have the right to mention my child, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. I have the right to find comfort in my faith, even if others disagree with what I believe in. I have the right to avoid social gatherings that will trigger me and cause me to feel pain. I have the right to cry anytime I want, even if it embarrasses you. I have the right to smile, even if you think it's inappropriate. I have the right to express my sorrow in any artistic manner I choose to, even if you don't like it. I have the right to work through my feelings of fear, anger, and rage at my own pace. I have the right to allow myself to accept compassion and empathy from others. I have the right to violate any of these rules anytime I want. Being a supporter of somebody in grief is the opportunity of a lifetime. It gives you the opportunity to use all of your resources and all the things that you've ever developed about compassion and empathy and help somebody through the most difficult period of their life. And that means, to me, the number one thing that you say when you walk up to somebody who's in grief that you want to support is, "I'm sorry." Then shut up. If you feel an urge to say anything more, say, "If you haven't gone through this," if you have, there's another thing, but if you have not gone through this, say, "I can never understand what you're going through." I belong to a club, and every member of my club, there are thousands of them that I've met over the last year and a half. Every member of my club says, "We are in a unique club that we hate being part of, But the only thing we hate more than being part of this club is welcoming somebody else into it. I don't want any of you to be part of this club. I want to be antisocial when it comes to this club. When you come up to me and say, I'm sorry, and I don't understand, the next thing that I would like you to think about saying is, tell me something about your son. Tell me some memory you have. And it's okay if you cry. I'm going to go out on a limb of my level of comfort, and I'm going to tell you that it's okay for you to cry. I'm here for you. All those things that people say, that your Heavenly Father has called him home to serve a mission, or he's more comfortable where he's at, or he's happier, or what a beautiful way to start your life. All of those things are said for the person who's saying them. They make you feel comfortable. That may be where you're out on a spiritual continuum. You may be a true believer that he's now got angel wings and he's playing a harp and he's on his cloud. Great. I'll try to remember that when it's your son or daughter, and I'll come up to you and I'll try to be empathetic and help you through your grief. For me, and for 90% of the people I know, a simple I'm sorry. The other thing is that this takes forever. There is no time limit. It changes our DNA. People who are in grief, I like to compare to all the mixings of a cake for their whole life. They're all sitting there on the counter, the eggs, the flour, the butter, the milk, the sugar. The second they get that phone call, they go into the oven and they become a cake. And for the rest of their life, they cannot unbake that cake. I am never going to be the sugar. I'm never going to be the flour. I'm never going to be the butter again. But you know what? I make a pretty good cake. I'm just different. Never give up on that person. One of the worst things that people in grief go through is loneliness, because people are uncomfortable to be around us. So we sit at home, we start drinking, we start contemplating being with our child. We think about how easy it would be to take the pills, to take the gun. We post all the time suicide prevention numbers. But the most important thing is, pick up the damn phone and call someone. Just to hear your voice brings us a step back. An invitation to a party that you know we're not going to go to means a lot. Occasionally knocking on the door and saying, you're coming to the party. You're getting out of the house. You've been there too long. Those help, but be compassionate in what you do. I have a poem, and then I want to open this up for some questions. This poem is written by a mother. Her name is Dawn Sale. Oh, what I wouldn't give so I could see you smile. I'd love to hear you laugh and joke with you a while. I'd love to sit and talk, or a long ride in the car, stay up late and watch TV, or sit and watch the stars. So many things I would do to have you here with me. Now, I have to close my eyes. That's where I know you'll be. Because I had you do the guided meditation, I want you to all to promise me one thing, that you will contact that child that you were thinking about, and all of your children, Give them a hug and a kiss and tell them that you love them. They're not gone. Let them know how important they are in your life. Live your life and just learn the most important lesson that I want to give you is this is your opportunity to rise, to be compassionate, and to be empathetic, and to go outside your comfort zones, to let other people know that they still care, they still matter. And it's my hope that none of you ever join my club. So that's what I have for you. Somebody crack a joke. Somebody say something funny, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to. Yes.
Your suggestion about asking someone to tell them something about their loved one, I think it's an excellent idea. How, after you hear that, there's going to be a very, very awkward end of that.
Right.
Any suggestions of how to get past that awkward ending?
Well, one of the things, so I have kind of a couple standard stories that I would tell when I'm asked that question. I mean, I have a couple rehearsed things that make me feel good. Sometimes it's off the cuff. But at the end of that story, most often what is appreciated from my perspective is just a simple thank you for sharing that. And if you're comfortable, if you're in the space, and if you have the familiar relationship, a hug. Just a simple hug. We lack contact. I think hugging is something that we should do for people who aren't in grief. If you're in that space, we need contact. And the thing about grief is it's so individual. But definitely giving an opportunity to give a hug and an assurance that I'm going to be here for you. This isn't the only time I'm going to be here for you. An exchange of a phone number if you're willing. Give me a call if if you need somebody to talk to. So there's a continuation after that. Okay.
Another question or a comment. One of the worst things I was ever told, I could think of two, was he's in a better place, kind of similar to what you said, and sorry, no. If he's not with me, he's not in a better place from my perspective. And I'm pretty sure from his perspective, he didn't have anything.
So I have a friend on one of my grief groups, and I'd never met her, but we become friendly. And so you have to kind of visualize this. This gets a little confusing. But I want you to imagine you're standing in front of a memorial at a gravesite. And this is what she did for her son. So you're reading that memorial, and her son's memorial says, I'd rather be with you. I'm not in a better place. So that's one of those artistic things that people can do. But yeah, it is a horrible thing to hear.
You're spot on that people say what makes them feel comfortable.
Right.
And often everyone intends to say something right, and people agonize over what's the right thing to say, I know. But I wholeheartedly agree. Anything beyond, I'm so sorry, and maybe tell me about this person at the right appropriate moment. In the immediate aftermath, that may not be the appropriate moment. But anything else is much more likely to be hurtful than helpful.
So important. I'm sorry, and I'm here for you.
You kind of covered part of my question. It seems like one, hearing from people suffering grief is that they feel like you're left alone because people don't know what to say further.
Right.
So I guess you kind of addressed that of start reinsert yourself in their lives and getting them talking about a child or feeling like it's okay to come out for things that you're welcome to. Next question I have too is anniversaries. How are those? What can we do? I know you've only probably gone for one anniversary, and it's probably hard.
Well, anniversaries and birthdays are the hardest ones for a child. So the interesting thing about my father passing this week is my son's birthday was Sunday. So I have a hidden memorial that I've built for him up in the mountains, off the trail. My father was in the hospital, he was in ICU. My spiritual belief is that my son is in a multi-dimensional universe populated by trolls and fairies and steampunk. And that he's a carpenter and builds poker tables for deities. So I'm writing a book on that, and a screenplay. But I was up there, and I have a conversation with my son. I still talk to my son. And I said, look after Grandpa. And if he's ready, I want you to take him. And so birthdays and anniversaries, and then I took a cupcake up there, and we had cake together. For people who want to be supportive, those times will come up the more you'll be made aware of the more supportive you are. So I'm not saying this because I'm seeking attention, but the more you include me in your life, the better off I'm going to be in my week. Say we rebuild our lives without our child. We never recover from this. There is no recovery, but we have to rebuild our lives. So I have a routine. I get up on Sunday morning and I go over to Coffee Pod. I don't want to, but I know that I like the people there, and it gets me back into life. I have been of service to my parents for the last 3 months, where I get out of bed and go drive my mom around to her hair appointments and things like that. But if you have an event and you feel comfortable, call somebody you know and invite them. They may or may not show up. Sometimes just go pick them up. And the more you do that, the more you'll be aware of these trigger dates that will come up. And who knows, you make new friends too. And you're of service. It's a little bit different for you to say, look, I'm going to have a big party for Christmas, and all my friends are going to be there. But now add a level of service by, we're going to bring over, Steve or someone too, because he needs to get the heck out of the house and sing a Christmas carol. Yes.
I've been thinking about ritual and the value of ritual, and you described how you've created basically a shrine for your son,
Right.
And a ritual of your own that's meaningful,
Right.
that you were able to do in order to connect, in order to deal with grief. And I think that as secular people, we often ignore the value of ritual. And I was curious about any other rituals that you might have that you use to connect or to deal with grief.
Well, my writing of the book is kind of ritualized. I walk up in the mountains and find a quiet place, and I close my eyes and I visualize a scene that my son might be participating in, and then I just write that scene. And humor, okay? So I'm going to tell this really quick. My daughter-in-law, who is suffering because she's left with 3 children. The youngest was 6 weeks old when my son was killed. We have this joke. She's going to get remarried. I'm going to walk her down the aisle or give her away or stand by her. That was something I asked her because I love her and I want her to be happy. But my son was cremated, and and his best friend welded an urn for him. It's a really special urn. And another friend built a shelf So there's the urn that's up next to her bed that she talks to. Well, we have a big standing joke because she likes to feign anger that Jeff left her. So the joke is, am I taking the urn out of the room the first time I have sex? Or am I going to put it down on the nightstand so he has to watch? So humor is part of a ritual. You know, I'm not going to cry for the rest of my life. My son was funny as hell. You know, but the one thing that we do is when my dad died, we celebrated his life. When my son died, I now live through his life unlived. The grandchildren that I won't have. We had a wood shop that we worked in together. The projects that we won't build. You know, the trips that we won't take. Things like that. That's what happens. That's the difference between an elderly parent or spouse and a child, is that we celebrate a life lived, or we live through a life that wasn't lived. And so you create rituals. One of the things is that I would like, I'm extending an invitation, and this helps me a great deal. First of all, I'd like to lose 30 pounds. So if anybody ever wants to go see a really cool memorial, it's about 1.5 mile walk. It's pretty steep uphill and it's hidden, but I'd love to take as many people. I take just 2 or 3 people at a time, but if anybody wants to see it. There was one more question, or? Okay.
One more.
So I'm gonna ask the selfish question.
Yeah.
I've not lost a child.
Thank you.
And, Lillian, the little redhead with short red hair, she was born with leukemia, with a heart problem. And we thought that we were going to lose her. And so we went through some mourning, and that broke me down. And we didn't even lose a child. So you're talking, and I'm feeling really vulnerable here, like that could happen to me. And this is totally selfish, really, to ask you if there is anything that you can do to create a framework for managing that kind of stress, so that you're not as vulnerable to being destroyed by it.
I would say, and this is a discussion that we have within the grief groups, it's a different thing when your child is like at St. Jude's for a year, as it is to get the phone call that he was hit by a drunk driver and then didn't come back. The short answer that I have for that is to do as much pre-planning as you can. Take care of all the details that you can take care of, even if you never have to. Like, even if she lives to be 75 years old and your plans go into a drawer and they're never executed. But to have as much planning done as you can before that happens. The other thing is, create all the memories you can now. Enjoy your life together and be happy as much as you can now. So, but mostly the framework is prepare when you can. So thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm sorry I bummed some people out, but in this, he said he was selfish. So in my own selfish way, this is going to become part of my life work, because I need more people to understand for myself. So that's kind of my selfish motivation. So thank you.